Talking with the experts.
Dive into the future of economic systems with Noah Healy, where tech meets theory, in episode 526.
Well, that's where things become very challenging because the basic problem is that we essentially are a paradigm behind the curve. One of the things I've been saying for decades is that we have computers, we do not use computers. Many of the ways that people exploit information technology and AI would be akin to a medieval farmer getting a sort of modern 8-cylinder, muscle car engine and nailing it to his plow, and just hooking it up to the horses and letting them drag the thing while it's sitting there. The trick largely to exploit these is to figure out how to align your interests with the actual capacities of the technology.
Talking with the experts.
Welcome to Talking with the Experts, where we believe that success is a journey, and every journey is easier with help from friends. That's why we bring you top-notch experts and real business heroes eager to share their lessons from the road to success. We delve into new topics each week: effective marketing strategies, innovative problem-solving, financial planning, and team building. We tackle everything you need to know to grow your business and keep it thriving. Whether you dream about launching your first startup or a business veteran looking to shake things up, we've got you covered. With each episode, you'll gain knowledge, boost your confidence, and be inspired to take action. So, grab a coffee, make yourself comfortable, and join our exciting journey. You're not alone in this. We're here, guiding you, cheering for you, and celebrating each milestone. Let's turn your business dreams into reality, starting today. Here is your host, Rose Davidson.
Hello and welcome to Talking with the Experts. I'm your host, Rose Davidson. Talking with the Experts is all about business by business owners for business owners. You can find it on all podcasting streaming platforms and on YouTube. Today my guest is Noah Healy, and Noah's going to be discussing with us how markets are the world's first AI technology, and with the internet and modern computer resources, markets are being taken over. He's going to share with us information and strategy of building systems that can use AI systems to help people economically. Now, Noah is a market designer and game theorist working on better economic systems. After training in nuclear engineering, he worked for tech startups at the peak of the dot-com boom. Becoming fascinated by the mathematics of information and computation, this led to patent work on a better commodity market design. My goodness, I'm not really up with it. Must be too early in the morning for me. Noah, thank you so much for joining me today, and your topic sounds totally fascinating. So tell me how after becoming a nuclear engineer, why go into AI?
Well, basically, I needed a job. I studied nuclear engineering because there were good professors in that department, but as it happens, nuclear is much out of fashion as a profession in my country and in many others. And getting out of college in 2000, getting jobs in the dot-com sector was unbelievably easy. So that's what I did.
Oh, well done. Okay, so how explain about AI, and how it can help a business economically?
Sure. Well, AI has really seized the public consciousness in this generative systems that are, able to write poems for you and fill out your email and so on. But the general concept of AI has deeper roots than that. And what it's largely about is being able to use machines to take control or make decisions. And so these generative systems are examples of machines that can produce English and some other language sentences that appear to be human generated. There are similar types of things that create images that appear to be human generated. But as anybody in business knows, the really important things are actual, economic decisions. How much production you want to do, what kinds of products you want to make, and that process has been gradually mathematicizing, largely since World War II, when it was discovered that things like planning and logistics were actually math problems that could be carried out, and it wasn't, people weren't close to as good as it was actually possible to be, by taking on this idea of making it a math problem. We were actually able to make things much more efficient than we ever thought that they could be. Markets are another example where, by having lots of people come together in a public forum to negotiate, and by communicating the results of those negotiations to the people in that forum, you get much better price discovery. And so you can decide whether you want to be in wool or cotton, or spices or beef or whatever. And by setting that up, once again, we reach the position where companies have a much better bead on what they can do. Modern companies find it highly convenient that they can buy bulk materials at pretty stable prices with high predictability. And that's where things like low or zero inventory comes in. Without the markets functioning, that stops working, because you would not only need to have a stock inventory to build out your things, you'd also have to have the expertise to analyze the quality of the inputs, because you wouldn't be able to depend on high quality inputs either.
So is that a little bit like how the stock market works? People buy the shares and stocks fluctuate, and then they sell shares and then they fluctuate again. So is that a little bit about how, AI?
Very much. That's how existing markets function. Yeah, the term stock in stock market is the same root as the term stock in stockyard. The markets that we presently use were originally designed, or actually we think they were accidents, for trading shipments around the Mediterranean that were being captained by the powerful merchant houses of the northern Italian city-states just before the Renaissance. And it was adapted mostly by Amsterdam during the period where they were Spain's deep water port, and the New World silver was being imported to Europe.
Wow, that's very interesting.
To the kinds of stock markets that we think of today.
I guess, for those of us that use AI to, write an email, or to, write a blog, or, write a page for our website, how can we use that same technology to help our business in an economic sense?
Well, that's where things become very challenging, because the basic problem is that we essentially are a paradigm behind the curve. One of the things I've been saying for decades is that we have computers, we do not use computers. Many of the ways that people exploit information technology and AI would be akin to a medieval farmer getting a sort of modern 8-cylinder, muscle car engine and nailing it to his plow, and just hooking it up to the horses and letting them drag the thing while it's sitting there. The trick largely to exploit these is to figure out how to align your interests with the actual capacities of the technology. And so while it's becoming more and more common for people to use these things in blog posting and email communications and so on, and increasing spam, that's actually also going on in the marketplaces. It turns out that just as we now have AIs that can compose your business messages for you. We've actually been able to use AIs like these to generate the much simpler messages of trading information for decades. And so just as our email inboxes, if you had one 20 or 30 years ago, there was sort of a time before spam, and then there was a time of massive spam, and then a time of spam filters. And we're kind of getting back into a new era of spam today as it becomes possible to create entire personas online as the source of spam. All of that has been happening in the financial markets for decades, but without any of that spam filtering part going on. And so the messages are becoming less and less attached to reality in those spaces. So that's where it gets challenging. If you want to exploit these things for your own purposes, there are some fairly small and simple things that you can do of, say, getting an AI agent to read your inbox and do some other light kind of spam filtering. There's some other kinds of document transfers. So we've seen improvements in people being able to, say, point their phone camera at a receipt stub in order to fill out the form for the credit to their accounts and so on. Things like that will continue, but the real big wins are going to be in restructuring how you do things so that computers who are capable of much quicker action than people and much more action than people can have a constrained enough environment that they aren't going to be doing damage to us by simply turning that wheel as fast as they possibly can.
Interesting. Not that I understand all of it, but I get the gist of what you're trying to say. Now, tell me a little bit about this patent work that you have.
Well, so that's one of my solutions. So I found a way to approach these math problems, and then you get this complicated math problem where if you find a solution, you get one of these outcomes that helps you improve business. And so I have a marketplace that, instead of the traditional buyer-seller model of markets, actually operates on a three-sided producer-consumer negotiator model. So the idea is that people put on one of their hats. So if you put on your negotiator hat, you're going in and trying to figure out what price the entire market will trade at. If you put on your producer hat, you're accepting whatever price has been negotiated by the marketplace, which you might have participated in, or maybe you didn't, to decide how much you want to sell at the price that's been negotiated. If you put on your consumer hat, you're deciding how much you want to buy, once again, at the price that's negotiated. You have no negotiation power when you've got your buyer hat on. So by structuring things in this way, we can separate the intent to trade from the knowledge of trade. And that's a very subtle distinction, and one that, as I said, doesn't exist right now in the market. If you go down to the shops and you want to buy some food, you know how much you want to buy food and you know what you like to eat. And so you're combining the desire with the knowledge to be able to make your half of the deal. And for personal consumption, this is entirely reasonable. I don't know nearly enough about you to negotiate your snack purchases on your behalf, nor would you know enough about me to do so. But in the aggregate level, what the price of milk or cheese or wheat or corn or whatever will be is something that our private knowledges actually aggregate together into a public price level. And so in that sense, it is possible for us to negotiate on each other's behalf in order to establish these base levels for these bulk products.
Interesting. I keep saying everything's interesting, but it is to me, because I've never heard of AI used in such a way that it can, I guess, change the outcome perhaps of what people are buying and selling things for.
Well, it's sort of very unfortunate that that is the case. A lot of AI research has largely been focused on what is or isn't possible. And much like the famous scene from Jurassic Park, they're so fascinated by whether or not they could, they never thought about whether or not they should. What has been happening with these technologies promulgating is that we're basically gaining lots of capacity to do stuff that isn't very useful for us. And that's wasting a lot of our time and energy and money, in fact, as markets are booming and crashing over and over again. And that makes any kind of sustained planning almost entirely pointless, because tomorrow isn't going to look anything like today, because there's going to be a market boom or a market crash or both between now and then. And so my unfortunately unique point of view is that you actually have to do alignment first. If you don't create the framework within the system to do good for you, then you can't just sort of build it and have it work out. In much the same way that if you were building a new machine, you would start with a plan of what thing you would want the machine to accomplish, and then design the parameters and solve the problems of how to put together wheels and gears and engines and so on, so that that is what happened. What we have been doing is sort of figuring out whether or not it's possible to have a trip hammer, hit with several thousand tons of force, or whether or not you can get a flywheel to spin at 6,000 RPM. And we're just sort of piling these things up around us. And just as anyone who's been on a factory floor knows, that it's exceptionally dangerous to be around these machines without understanding what their intended purpose is and how to be around them safely. The same thing is very much true for objects like the internet, which is, of course, in all of our individual homes. We very much have not built these with an understanding of what outcomes we wanted to produce at the end stage. And as a result, there's been a lot of good and a lot of bad. We have sort of a lot of capacity, but some of that capacity is helping us out, and some of that capacity is metaphorically ripping off limbs as they get mangled in the machines.
So what can we do to better the system? What checks and balances do we need to put in place for this?
Well, that's sort of where my insight comes in. That's where my work in game theory comes from. So game theory provides us a way, once again, to mathematicize strategy considerations. So just as we can build mathematical models to allow us to design the wheels and suspension system of a car, this lets us build mathematical models that lets us design the systems of interacting between salesmen and producers and so on. And so the trick is finding these, I call them kind of natural arches, these situations where multiple parties all have a joint interest in a common outcome. So for markets, for example, the makers and the users both want the market to exist, because the makers want an income stream and the users want the widgets, whatever those things are, because they're fun to play with, or they eat them, or whatever. And so they have a common interest in there being a public price. Because if there wasn't a public price, there wouldn't be a marketplace, and either the widgets wouldn't be there when you went to the shop, or your income wouldn't be there when you went to the shop. So everybody wants the same thing. finding ways to get everybody to want the same thing becomes more complicated the more different kinds of interests are involved. And it can, in fact, be impossible in sort of purely political issues. There actually are real dissents of interest, and sadly, I do not have a general solution to all of human problems. So, for those kinds of issues, you have to think a little harder than I have done. But that's basically what's going on.
Oh, wow. It's a lot to take in, really. You know, for people that don't understand a lot how AI works and just use it for, you know, as we've discussed before, you know, the mind boggles really on what it can and can't do to better our life. And, you know, should we be thinking more strategically on how we're using AI in our everyday life?
It's an absolute necessity to re-examine your life in the light of the capacities that now exist. We're going to see most of the institutions that presently exist be eaten up by these capacities. As I've said, markets have already been globally destabilized, and it wasn't caused by war or pestilence or plague. It was caused by the computers being able to talk to each other faster than we are consciously capable of understanding. And so even going all the way back to the Dow Jones crash of 1987, we've seen an increasing frequency of short-sightedness built into market behaviors, causing wild swings in market valuations. And that's going to keep happening and become more and more extreme. And it's a currently completely valid strategy for those that have no care for the future and sort of want to grab as much money as they can, to use these existing AI systems that are now very public and available to drive that particular, you know, car closer and closer to that cliff. It's much easier today to set up large-scale communication networks and try to create mass hysterical responses among the retail and institutional investors, which you will then be able to capitalize on by sort of betting appropriately and hedging appropriately into these kinds of things happening. And I would be unsurprised to start hearing, you know, news about that. Similar types of things exist in other fields. As AI makes administration easier and easier, intermediation strategies will become easier and easier and easier. So people will be able to take over, you know, fractional parts of your business. They can offer you lower cost access to logistics or energy or mail or whatever. But that kind of strategy has a sting in the tail. Companies like Uber and OpenTable actually managed to pull it off. Uber is still in transition, but their long-term value plan is to monopolize a niche within the business sector, and then once they've monopolized it, exploit that monopoly power to essentially force everyone in that business sector to hand over their profits. That second stage is much harder to achieve, and we'll see a lot of political and other kinds of conflicts being driven by people who, you know, built, in many cases, very expensive businesses that intended to take your money away from you, from the business that you're operating, and people that are operating those businesses that would like to remain in business and not turn all their money over to people who've spent a lot of money trying to figure out how to take all of yours. Even Amazon is in a certain amount of trouble, which may or may not wind up going anywhere, for allegedly unfair business practices. And they do appear to be creating Amazon brands that can encroach on the sales of some of their high margin suppliers. They've also allegedly been able to use AI to reduce their labor costs by identifying when people might have reached their end of service and easing them out or firing them before they'd be forced to pay long-term workers' comp benefits. In the context of humans, this is of course horrifying, but in the context of other kinds of fleet management, if you say had rental cars or some other large-scale array of machines, AI has become a very natural fit to essentially put detailed logging into literally everything, and then being able to analyze detailed logging in literally everything, which then gives you a much more specific management, sort of setting. So something like 3D printing could change a manufacturing process from a highly specialized one to a highly generic one, with large numbers of machines substituting for highly specific machines. And then you can use AI agents to manage those machines rather than needing the sort of high cost human beings to do those things. And so you can create this much more automated factory floor that's simultaneously radically more general purpose factory floor. And these are the kinds of possibilities that are just that's just the low-hanging fruit. Like if you think about these things deeply, it becomes very obvious very quickly that even our current legal systems aren't really up to snuff to deal with the implications of computers engaging in human-ish behavior.
Certainly is food for thought, Noah. I guess people need to be more informed about how AI is impacting on their everyday lives. Noah, where can people find you if they want to know more about you and more about how they can use AI, or in fact not use AI in their business?
Well, I actually have a podcast discussing AI and its implications for the future that the former CTO of Reddit co-hosts with me. It's called The Fourth Age, the AI Revolution, subtitle. And so that's also up on Spotify and YouTube and other places. So if you want more of this, there is more of that available. My system is called CoreDisk for Coordinated Discovery Markets, CoreDisk.com. You can find it there. If you'd like to reach out to me, my email is noahphealy@yahoo.com. You can find me on LinkedIn. I'm Noah Healy there. And the patent work you mentioned, the patent office is basically breaking its own rules in order to try to put up roadblocks. So I have a pending appeal that will be heard in July 2025. And I have a petition that I just recently started to try to record interest in the outcome of this. And so if any of your listeners or you would like to sign, that would help me out a great deal. So that's up on change.org under caps CDM _ all lowercase patent.
Lovely. All right. So if you want to find out more about Noah, just head over to his LinkedIn page, and I'm sure he'll have a load of information on there. Noah, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you for sharing your wisdom with us today. And I guess some words of wisdom if you'd like to share with our audience today.
The fourth age is what our podcast is named. Computers are a bigger deal than steam engines. So if you look at the history of the world before and after steam engines, it's a very different place. We should expect changes at least that large within our lifetimes. And so we can either go with the flow and build a much, much better society and economies, or we can try to fight it. And I can't give those in the fighting category any good outcomes that I can see.
All right, Noah. Again, thank you so much for sharing with us, and I look forward to talking to you again in the future sometime. Bye-bye for now.
You've been listening to Talking with the Experts, hosted by Rose Davidson. Make sure you have a look at our back catalogue over at talkingwiththeexperts.com. And be sure to subscribe to our podcast so you don't miss out on any episode. We look forward to your company next time. Talking with the Experts.